All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you all so much for coming to July's exclusive monthly chat for our box subscribers. We are happy you're here. Uh, I am your host, Caddy Betterton, and today we have a pretty incredible guest that I am excited to talk to. Mindy is an Edgar Award-winning novelist who writes across post-apocalyptic, historical, thriller, mystery, and fantasy genres, among others. As a ninth-generation farmer, Mindy infuses themes of small-town living and rural poverty into her writing. But no matter the genre, you can always count on Mindy's books to deliver grit, truth, and the unflinching look at humanity. Mindy, we are so excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I was glad to be able to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you today. If it's all right with you, I'm going to jump right into our questions. And for
Well,
all of
thank
our listeners out there, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat as our conversation unfolds, and I'll pick a few at the end to ask. So, Mindy, can you tell us a little bit about your career trajectory and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I was just having a conversation with someone else actually, and I ended up doing the math, which kind of threw me. But I received, let's see, I think I have at this point in time 12 published books. My 13th comes out next March, and I'm currently writing the 14th, which will be out in 2025.
Wow.
And I know. And I've been publishing since 2013. So I've been at this for almost 10 years. Well, actually, no, it will have been 10 years because, anyway, I've been doing this a while. And I really have to take time sometimes to think back about how I did make this journey because I was querying for 10 years before I got an agent. And that is something that people sets them back when I tell them that. But the truth is that I definitely was not in a position where my writing deserved representation until it did. It took me 10 years to be worthy of representation. I believe I had written 4 novels. I had queried and finished and queried 4 different novels, and none of them were getting anywhere for various reasons. The first 3 truly were just not good. They definitely did not deserve representation. The 4th one was more of an issue of I was writing urban fantasy, and that particular trend at that point in time had fallen off, and so that book wasn't getting anywhere. But so it was my 5th novel that ended up receiving representation, and I was querying back when you sent self-addressed stamped envelopes and you physically mailed your query to New York, and you would get an envelope back in the mail with your own handwriting on it, and it was always terrifying. So yeah, I actually have a box. I have a like a hammer mill paper box that is full of physical rejections, and then I have a folder on my old Hotmail account that has all of my rejections that I received. I always tell people once agents opened up to email querying, it was such a relief because I could get rejected so much faster. It was wonderful.
Which is such a fun-ish way to describe rejection. That's a great positive outlook to have. It's quick, then you get to know instead of having to wait for the mail.
Yeah, don't have to wait anymore. Like, nope, that one said no. Just cross that off. But yeah, it was an experience. So when I do talk to aspiring writers and I talk about, yeah, man, I get it. Like, I really do. I had that suffering for
Mm-hmm.
10 years and, balancing it out with 10 years of publication now. So I cannot complain, but I always remind myself to be grateful.
I love that thought from you. And if you don't mind, I want to just dive in a little bit more because I think, um, you know, querying for 10 years is quite a time. It's a whole decade to query. And as somebody who has also queried before, and I'm sure a ton of our listeners have as well, um, it can be really hard. I mean, there's so many things going on with querying, but I think one of the things that's hard is reconciling the market trends, kind of like you said with that urban fantasy, with what you're writing. Can you talk a little bit to maybe with that 4th book, just some of the feelings and thoughts going through your head of, all right, maybe my writing's up to snuff, but this isn't what the market wants, and what do I do now?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons why I kept writing and I kept trying was actually because of a rejection, believe it or not. There was an agent, her name's Jennifer Loughran. She is still out there doing what she does. She's a great agent. She is not my agent, but she is a wonderful agent. And she was like a gold mine. If you could get Jennifer Loughran, you were doing amazing. So um she was my top tier. She was an A+. That's one of the gold standards. I was really trying to get Jennifer Loughran, and I had queried her like twice before and rejected both times. And then with my fourth novel, the third time I queried her, she requested the partial, sent her the partial, asked for the full, sent her the full. And she emailed me and said, I am sorry I sat on this for so long. It was a very difficult decision. I am going to pass, but the only reason I am passing is because of the trend being over. Your writing is solid, and I absolutely guarantee that you are going to get published, and I am going to regret rejecting you.
Wow.
And it was such a lovely rejection. And I have talked to her personally multiple times since then. And I've told her, your rejection is why I kept writing. And that is true. So it is painful when you get that feedback, not this one, right? Not this book. And it is hard. Like, it is bittersweet because you know that you have what it takes, but also this particular product is not going to be what breaks you out. And that can be hard because you do have an emotional connection with each and every one of your books. And my particular book that was my urban fantasy still remains unpublished. At this point, it's so far outside of my brand that it's just not going to happen. I'll have to self-publish it under a pen name. But having said that, I am so glad that I did not publish that book, that book did not get published, because of the fact that it is outside of my actual wheelhouse. It was an idea that I had that I don't typically generate. And so that book not getting published was actually a blessing because my branding is very consistent. I write across genres, but the tone and the voice and the feel is always the same. And that book, that wasn't the case. I was still finding my voice. And I think that can be very important when you are first querying. I wrote 5 novels before I think I really found my actual voice. And you continue to develop. My first book came out 10 years ago, and I don't read my own stuff. I don't think anybody does. But I guarantee you that if I were to go back and read that book now, that I would change it because I have changed. I'm, 13 years a better writer now, more experience. So your voice does develop and change as you write. But I do think it's important to have the good feel for that. And it might be your first finished novel. You might have 20 partials and then you find your voice and you've got it and you finish a novel. Like for me, it took 5 full novels before I really, number one, knew how to write, but then also knew what my voice was. So I do think that everyone says never give up when it comes to querying. And I agree with that, obviously, having done it for 10 years. But I also want to emphasize that I totally gave up like multiple times. I was not sending out queries every day. That would have been just, heinous. So for one thing, I couldn't have afforded it because stamps, but
Right.
I would get very disheartened, and I would literally query every agent that represented what I had written and get rejected by all of them, and realize that I had to start again and write another book. And I would be like, you know what? Gonna chill out for like 2-3 months, maybe 4, right? I'm just gonna chill out on this and go do something else. And, you know, I was working full time. I was a librarian. I had a very busy life. I was writing in those stolen moments. So I would give myself a break. And then when I had something ready to go, I call my brain a crock pot. Like, it takes time, things got to cook. But then it's ready. And I'm like, okay, it's time. And I'll start writing another book, the next thing. And typically that would take me 6 months, 8 months. And then I would put it away for 2 months at least, minimum
Mhm.
6 weeks, but 2 months. Come back, revise. The things that you see when it's not fresh anymore in your mind is amazing. So I would take breaks. Everyone says never give up. And I say maybe give up occasionally, but then, you know, come back.
Well, I mean, I think that's such great advice. And I mean, just how perfect is that to the testament of 10 years of querying paying off? I mean, the only way to guarantee failure is to stop trying. So I really loved what you said about giving yourself some space, because I think a lot of people sometimes feel, me included, sometimes feel like not writing for a couple of weeks or taking a break on a project for a couple of months could be a failure or could be perceived as giving up, when in reality it might be one of the best things to serve that project. Am I kind of on the same track as what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Distance will give you clearer vision. There is no doubt. I hear that advice often, write every day, and I really resent it. I don't think, I mean, it's not bad advice. Like, yeah, when I am drafting, I do try to write every day. But you know what? It's also like this is my actual job, and I also have a life. So I don't write on the weekends. I'm not working on the weekends.
Mm.
And so I don't write every day, even when I'm drafting. And when I'm not writing a book for contract, I mean, 6, 8 months will go by without me writing. And it does make it a little more difficult to start up again.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like riding a bike, like you're going to be okay. And this was true even when I was querying and I was new to writing. You can't possibly, I don't believe, write every day when all you are getting is rejections. It just, you're hitting your head against a brick wall. And that is painful. And eventually you will have a TBI. So just take a freaking break. Like you can't do that to yourself. You can't, I mean, at some point it's almost, you know, like, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just like self-flagellation
Mm.
at some point, and you do need to take a break and take care of yourself, and just also you get to a point where you just kind of hate it. Like, I mean, personally, I would be like, I don't want to write. Okay, then don't, right? Like now I have to. This is my job. But when I had the opportunity to be like, you know what, I don't want to write today, I'd be like, you know, that's okay. That's all right. You don't have to. Um, but also, I think one of the reasons why I dislike the advice to write every day is because the vast majority of us also have full time jobs
Mm.
and kids and families and relationships and friends and pets and who even knows what all. And some people hear that advice that you have to write every day if you want to be a writer. And they think, well, I don't have time for that. And so they never even try. And I
Mm.
think it's very exclusive advice. I think that it is, that advice usually is coming from people that have the opportunity to do that because they aren't working full time. So yeah, that is a piece of advice that, yes, I do find that writing comes more easily when I do it every day. It's easier to start the engine again the next day. Do I think it's necessary? No, I don't.
Okay, so follow-up question for you then. If writing every day isn't necessary, what would you say a necessary quality or action would be to become a successful, excuse me, become a successful writer?
I think you have to wonder. You have
Mm.
to do a lot of wondering and you have to be curious. So many of my ideas, so many of, and I do think you have to also, you have to be out there in the world and you have to be coming into contact with other people. I don't think you can find much, and I know that that's like difficult because a lot of us are introverts, but I think it's really hard to find inspiration in your own environment 24/7. I don't think it comes easily. And just about every single one, well, no, I'm not going to say every single one. Many of my books have come about because of an experience that I had, or a moment, something that occurred outside, not necessarily of my comfort zone, but outside of my, like, not necessarily home, but like my environment. So I do think you do have to always be asking, what if? Like, what if? The weirdest things. So my book titled The Initial Insult and The Last Laugh, those are based on Edgar Allan Poe short stories. And I got the whole idea for those books when I was driving home. I still substitute in the same district that I used to work at as a librarian. And I had been substituting, and I was driving home from the school, and a cat ran out in front of my car in town. And I slammed on the brakes because I will brake for animals 100% of the time. Humans, like 50-50, but animals, 100%. So I slammed on the brakes, and the cat was like, ah, and I was, ah, and the cat was fine. Like, I didn't hit it, and it ran away. And it was a black cat. It was a pure black cat. And my adrenaline was going. And so, like, all these chemicals had flooded my brain. And I was driving, and I was thinking, a lot of people would say black cat crossed your path. That's bad luck. But I love black cats. I've had multiple pets that were black cats, and they're very affectionate. And, Edgar Allan Poe used the black cat as an arbiter of justice in his short story. And maybe I missed that cat for a reason, and it's going to go like solve a murder. And then I was like, that's stupid, Mindy. That's the dumbest thing you've ever thought. But then I was like, yeah, okay. But like, what if there was some sort of element of a mystery that came into the world of animals? And why have you never written anything that was Edgar Allan Poe based? Like, why wouldn't you do that? You should do that. You love Edgar Allan Poe. The Black Cat's one of your favorite short stories. Why have you never written anything based off the Black Cat? And then the other side of my brain was like, well, actually, you should use the Cask of Amontillado because everybody reads that freshman year in English. And then the other side of my brain says, oh, but also you need to use The Fall of the House of Usher. And I was just like, oh, I do? I do, right? It is a 7-minute drive from the school to my house. And I had the concept for 2 books in that 7 minutes. And I wrote it down as fast as I could, and I shot it off to my editor, and he was like, wow, yeah, this is great. And that all happened because I was driving home from work and a cat ran out in front of my car. 2 books came out of that. And so it's like, you just always have to not be afraid to let your mind wander and not be afraid to let it play. And it'll go weird places, and that's cool.
Oh my gosh. I think that is my favorite answer to any question I've ever asked, because how cool is it to have gotten into your mind for a sec just to see where, like, a seemingly innocuous drive home from a regular day at work, like, turns into just this 2-book world inside your head that you put on paper, and then thousands of people get to read it. Like, that is thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really, really special for our subscribers to be able to hear how a successful author's mind works and comes up with these ideas. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of my books come from moments like that. I can tell you the inciting event for every single one of my books. There is an inciting event, and the vast majority of them just come from me going, okay, what if, right? And things go from there.
Well, now I'm curious if there are any other ones you want to share. Please feel free.
Sure, I'd be happy to. If you want to just pick, one of my titles, I can tell you where the concept came from.
All right, I'm going to give it 2 minutes for anybody that's listening to give me their picks before I just go off and ask. Alrighty. Okay, well, I'm not going to give them too many more because I am curious. I'd be really curious. So I've already, you said The Initial Insult. What about Be Not Far From Me?
Okay. I'm happy to tell you about Be Not Far From Me. It's also a wonderful breakup story. So, I was dating a guy that was a nature photographer.
Okay.
And I live in Ohio, and he wanted to go to a place called, if I'm remembering correctly, it's called Elk Creek Park or something like that, or
Okay.
Elk Park National Forest, something like that. It is in Pennsylvania. And he wanted to go there because it is this huge expanse. It is a place where people die and they get lost, and it's ridiculous. And it's in a national forest, and those are not managed. So nobody's out there making sure the trails are clear. There aren't rangers. You're hiking at your own peril, any of that. So he wanted to go there. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's go there. So we do. And we go out and we're hiking, and he was not a person that wanted to do like overnights. He didn't want to sleep out in the woods. He liked to do, like a morning hike, have lunch, whatever, and then do an evening hike. So we were doing our evening hike, and we did not have anything with us for night hiking. We were just going out and putting in like 2 hours, So he finds a trail on a map that he wants to try, and we go out on the trail. And these trails, again, they're not marked. They're not managed. The trail is about as wide as your arm. It's just like an animal path. It's very small. Yeah. It's very, very small. So we go out there, and it was a loop. This particular trail was a loop. So it just, you park your car at the entrance, and it goes out in a circle, and it brings you back. And there wasn't any distance marked. There was just a picture of a circle. And so we head out there. It's summertime, so it doesn't get dark until like 9:30. And we head out around like 6 o'clock. And we're out on this loop, and we get to a point where there's a spur. So a spur is a smaller loop that brings you back, dumps you out, you do the spur, and then it pops you back at the point where you left the loop. So my boyfriend's looking at the basically there's a metal sign, and it is just like grown into a tree, and it's got no markings on it or anything. And it doesn't even say like you are here. It's just like there's one circle that's the loop, and then a smaller circle that's the spur. And it's completely unhelpful. And my boyfriend is like, hey, I want to do the spur. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know, man, because there aren't any distances marked. And I'm just looking at the size of the spur compared to the size of the loop and where we're at in the loop. And it's a lot more dense in here. The canopy is really dense. It's a lot closer than I thought it would be. We're actually going to lose light earlier. I don't know. I don't know if this is a good idea. And he was like, I really want to do the spur. So at that point in my life, I was supposed to be working on being nicer. So I was like, okay, let's do the spur. All right. So fast forward, it's 10 o'clock. And
oh my gosh.
We are just freaking lost. Okay. We are just, I don't even know where we were. And we do not have anything for night hiking. We do not have lights. We do not have water. We do not have food. We do not have anything. It is dark. And like I said, we don't have flashlights. We're using our phones. Mine has died. His battery is at 1%. And he would just whip out his phone every now and then, make sure we're still on the trail. And finally I was like, stop. Like, look, we're on the trail right now. We know that we're on the trail. At least we assume this is the trail. We need to stop. We could easily go off the trail and get lost in the dark. And people do die out here. So I was like, we're done. Stop. We're going to sleep on top of the trail, and it's going to be uncomfortable and shitty, and it's going to suck. But we're going to wake up in the morning, and then we'll walk out of here in the daylight. And he was thinking about that. And as he was thinking about it, we hear something very large move in the woods behind us. And this is a part of the country where there's bear and there's cats and there's elk. And other humans is really what I worry about more than anything. But he was like, oh, we got to go. And I was like, okay. And so I had a flannel on, took off my flannel, and we looped it through each other's belt loops. We tied ourselves together so that we wouldn't get separated. And we just kept going as best we could. And we finally did break out onto the highway, the fire road. And it was like, I think it was 11 o'clock. And we were 2 miles away from our car. And I don't know how that happened, But somehow, I think we were on an animal trail by the end, but we got out. And to his credit, the first thing he did as soon as we got out, he turned to me and he said, "I'm sorry." And
Oh.
that's okay because I got an idea for a book.
Oh my gosh. Oh, see, again, this story is so like it's just such a testament to having experiences makes you a better writer and can create all of these different things and the wonder that you were talking about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because as I was walking, it's like I am a hiker and I am an outdoor person, and I know enough to not die. If we'd been out there for an extra day or two, we between the two of us, we probably could have not died. But anything beyond that, no, you would not be talking to me right now. So I was thinking as I was walking, I was like, okay, you got to start thinking about water. Number one, you got to think about water. And then after that, you need to think about food. And I'm not in my home state. I'm not sure how different the plants are. I can identify poisonous plants, but maybe not a ton, right? And so I was just like running through all the things that I knew and being like, man, that's not enough. That's not enough. And just like, hey, you should definitely think about this. Like, what if you were out here? What if you were out here for a month? What would happen? And even how would that affect your brain? Because I was not panicking, but I was already in a weird state of alternative universe where I was like, okay, if I have been out here for a month. But yeah, so we did end up breaking up. I think that was
Oh, well, at least our side of the story has a good ending because we got the book from it. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, I could ask you about literally all of your books, but I would love to move on to your writing process specifically. Every author has a different writing process. So I was wondering if you could just give us a little peek behind the curtain of, once you have that idea, what happens? Are you a pantser? Are you a plotter? Do you write on paper? Just give us a little bit of what you do.
So I am a total and complete absolute pantser. I should say, I have never had any writing instruction in my life. I have never taken a writing class. I have never, like my high school, very basic classes. There were certainly never any creative writing classes. Went to college, majored in English, but I never took any creative writing classes. I was always, reading other people's stuff. As an adult, never went to like a weekend conference, like nothing. I have had zero exposure to any type of craft in my life. I learned to write by reading. So sometimes people talk to me about how do you build a character, or how do you world build effectively, and how do you craft a character that feels real? And I'm like, I don't know, I just do it. So, when it comes to writing, my process makes many of my writer friends feel nauseous. So I really don't know what's going to happen. I can have a general idea, like with my Poe books. I was like, we're going to use the structure of these 6 Poe stories, and the cutoff is going to be here, and there's going to be a talking panther, right? So it was like, those were my thoughts. And, I just start writing and I see what happens. I'm currently working on my release for 2025. And I had a very, very rough idea. And I had sent the proposal into my editor. And at this point, my editor is very accustomed to me saying, and I think this is kind of what maybe will possibly happen. And they're like, okay, good enough, right? And then I write something that may or may not follow what I had given them in the first place, usually not. So I sit down and I start writing. And for example, the book I'm working on right now, it has 3 different narrators, 3 female narrators. And one of the storylines deals with emotional abuse. One of the storylines deals with a girl that is way too caught up in her social media life. And then The third one is more about like people pleasing skill, or people pleasing to a fault, and anxiety. And these three storylines come together because these three girls have a problem with how sex ed is taught in their school, which is to say it simply isn't. So they have kind of come together to create like an off-site sex ed conversation for girls their age. And so it's like a Dead Poets Society for sex ed.
Okay, yeah.
So I've been working on that. And originally, I was very excited about writing the emotional abuse storyline because the main character there is a girl who is a very fierce athlete, and she is a weightlifter and a fighter and like medium famous in her own world for what she does. And I was very excited to write her storyline. And I still am. I enjoy her character a lot, but man, I started writing the girl who all of her happiness depends on her social media. And I was just like, oh my God, I was pulled in by her like immediately. And she was so vulnerable and so easy to access. And writing her has been, I look forward to writing her POV chapters the most. And I didn't expect that. I expected her to be the most difficult one to access. So as far as the process, it's like I sit down and I usually have a first line in mind. First lines are very important. And I usually have an idea for that. And then I just go from there. And I have a guiding light of what each storyline, how it's probably going to end. But I don't know how we get there. And I just kind of see what happens as I write. I don't plot. I don't plan. I don't have an outline. I don't know how long the book is going to be. I don't know how many chapters. I have no freaking clue. Like I am just going to see what happens. And when I talk about my writing process, a lot of people just like look like they're going to have a heart attack, but it works for me. And I don't look at it too hard, and I don't try to analyze it or pull or pick or poke it, because it's worked for like 14 novels. So I just keep going.
Well, I first of all, I love to hear, that when you said that you don't have what people traditionally think is like all of the craft classes and instruction and everything. And that's really empowering to me as someone also who doesn't have it. And I'm sure any of the other scribblers on right now that maybe have that imposter syndrome of like, oh, I wasn't an English major in college, or, oh, I didn't go to X, Y, and Z conference, so how can I be a writer? So first of all, thank you for sharing that and for helping us all feel like, writing is again a craft of wonder and less of technicality. Of course, you need that part at some point in the process, but and then I also love the way that you were talking about how you are accessing different characters and how some surprise you. And it really seems like as you talk about them that your characters take on this personality of their own, and it's like they're telling you the story. Can you tell me a little bit more about maybe some of the other characters who have surprised you throughout all of the novels that you've written?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is very true that they take on their own life, and they just become, for a time, very real people inside of my head. That being said, they also aren't precious to me, because I mean, I'm a writer that kills off my characters, and people ask me all the time, is that hard? And I'm like, no. people, they're not real. Like you keep that in mind, but they are a figment of my imagination that I give free rein to, and therefore seem real. So they do take their own courses, and if they go somewhere you did not expect, if they do something you did not want them to do, they did it for a reason. I very often feel like I am not writing, I am just narrating. I am just writing down what these imaginary people are doing, and I don't feel like I control them at all. A good example of that is my most recent published book, A Long Stretch of Bad Days. My narrator is a girl named Lydia, and Lydia was very much supposed to be a good girl, a Mary Jane, a pretty much good at everything, valedictorian, sweet, kind, always does the right thing, and has a pure heart. And then her co-conspirator being girl from the wrong side of the tracks, and they're an unlikely duo trying to solve a murder, right? Like that was the whole idea. And and it's not dual POV. Lydia is the only narrator. And I started writing it in first chapter. Like it opens with Lydia and it's her internal monologue. And she was pissed. Like she was an angry person. And I would write 2 or 3 paragraphs and I would go back and I would read them and I'm like, no, this isn't what you're supposed to do. Like you are supposed to be like, good to the bone, right? And that wasn't what she was doing on the page. Like outwardly, the way that she interacts with other people is very much, hi, how can I help you? How are you today? What can I do for you? And on the inside, she's like, Jesus Christ, get out of my way. Right. And I was just like, what are you doing, Lydia? No. And then I read the paragraph. And I'm like, yeah, but that's really good. And so it's like I started writing her and she just went a very different way than I expected her to. And it ended up making a better book. She was a more interesting character. And my other character, Bristol, who is the rough girl from the wrong side of the tracks, can see it in Lydia right away. She's like, you know what? Everybody's afraid of me, but you're actually the dangerous one. And you have that kind of push-pull inside of Lydia, which just makes her more interesting. And I had no intention of that happening. She just went off and did it. And I was like, okay, like you can't argue. If they want to do something, you need to let them, because otherwise, like you're fighting them the whole way and it is not worth it. It's just so much more effort on your part.
Whew. This is for anyone who hasn't read more of Mindy's books. I hope that you are getting so excited because I'm loving to hear all of the internal workings of characters in your mind, and it's just this has been such a fun conversation so far. Okay, with just a few minutes left, anyone who wants to ask a question, please go ahead and drop it in. I am going to ask 2 more, specifically based around advice for starting out authors. And again, I will ask any other questions that drop in as we have time. So, Mindy, just a couple more questions for you. And thank you so much for all of the information that you've shared with us so far. This has been great. Alrighty. What would be some advice that you could give to aspiring authors? Maybe it's something that you would give to your younger self or something that you've learned recently.
I would definitely say that the only thing that you have to do in order to consider yourself a writer is to write. You do need to write if you want to be a writer. You don't have to do it every day, for sure, but write. And the only thing that I think is required in terms of an education is you have to read. You have to be a reader. That's it. I know writers that didn't graduate from high school and they are freaking phenomenal writers. And that's wonderful. I know people that have, master's degrees that really aren't that great. So, talent is something that, that is another thing that I would definitely say. I used to, when I was younger, when I was starting to write, when I was in college, I definitely believe that talent was a gift. And I believe that it was something that you were born with and that it could not be learned. And I have definitely changed my perspective on that. I think that when I read what I wrote when I was 18, 19 years old, I am amazed at how bad I was. Truly, truly a bad writer. And not having any idea whatsoever. Like I remember writing my first book in my college dorm room and just being like, yes, Pulitzer all the way, right? But you have to believe that in order to keep going. So I really did. I really believe that I had just been given this fantastic gift and that I was just this uncut diamond in the rough, and it simply wasn't true. When I look at my stuff that I wrote now, I'm just like, wow, that is embarrassingly bad. I learned, I got better. And I really do think that it is an aspect of not being precious. Like, yes, we're all special in our own ways, and that your story is only yours and you are the only person that can write it. But I don't think that any of us have something that no one else does. And that might set you back at first, but I think if you think about it in a positive light, it means that you can become anything. And I do really think that's true. When I look at how much I have grown as a writer, I don't think that I was given a particular talent. I was given particular interests. I was given a mind that has high RPMs. I'm always thinking, I'm always wondering. And one of the reasons I do that is because I read so much. So I think that in terms of being a writer, I have seen so many writers that just really want to be on a pedestal and think that they have some sort of, I guess, like inherent power or ability. And I think that we all just have something. We have to learn how to refine it.
Whew. I hope everyone is taking notes. That really, I love that. And I'm gonna make a T-shirt out of some of the things that you've been saying today. Okay, we do have 2 questions. So in the last couple of minutes, I am going to throw those up. So our first one is, how long after publishing your first book did you start making enough money to be a full-time writer? Now, again, please feel free to answer this however you would feel comfortable.
Sure. Yeah, totally fine. No problem answering that. So I had published my 7th book by the time I was able to say I want to be a full-time writer, and that just might be possible. And when I say it just might be possible, I mean it really just might be possible. I did manage it, but we're talking I got $5 in the bank. I have no checking. I mean, $5 in my checking. I have no savings. There is no money. And gee, I really hope that my old toys from the 80s sell well on eBay. So that is when I started making enough money to be a full-time writer, is when I started selling My Little Ponies on eBay to supplement my income. So writing is tough, and making a living as a writer is incredibly difficult. Like I said, I was 7 years in, 7th book, 7 years in before I was able to even consider it. And the only reason I was even able to consider it is because I had 2 books come out that particular year. Also, I did not quit my job because I was like, yes, I can absolutely do this on my own. I quit my job because they eliminated my position. I was a full-time aide in a library at the school, and the school that I worked at had basically decided that libraries weren't that important after all. And I had been moved to being a lunchtime cafeteria monitor and like waving orange sticks at buses. And I was like, you know what? I think I passed. So I took the opportunity to say, I'm going to see if I can do this. And it is freaking scary. I don't have insurance. I have to pay out of pocket for my insurance. And I'll just tell you right now, the insurance that I have is the cheapest plan I could get for where I live. I am the only person on that. It cost me $450 a month, and I have an $18,000 deductible. So that's tough shit right there, let me tell you. Yeah. So insurance, it's a real thing. I also don't have a spouse, so that comes into it too. I don't have any retirement. I have none. I have no retirement. So all of the things that you have to worry about as an adult are very, very pertinent. And taxes. All of your income is you're self-employed, so you don't have taxes come out of your checks that you get from your publisher. So you have to set aside a third, basically, of that, and that's going to be going back into the government. So when you read about big deals on Publishers Weekly and stuff like that, and so I'll just flat out say my first book sold for $75,000, and that sounds like a lot of money, and it is. However, the way that gets paid out is in increments of 1/3 over the course of 3 payments. You're paid when you sign the contract, so $25,000 when you sign the contract, $25,000 when you have a finished, completed, agreed upon book, $25,000 when it publishes. And that $75,000 is being dispersed over the course of 18 months to 2 years. Plus you got to take out 15% of that 25,000 for your agent, and then set aside 1/3 of what's left for taxes, and then take that amount and, like I said, spread it out over 18 months to 2 years. So it sounds juicy, and then when you break it down, you're like, oh, so actually I just can buy a better quality of litter now, right? So I mean, that's just, it is not the sexy red carpet life that people might think it is. And that's okay. I don't mind it. I'm not a person that relies on things. I am very much more happy to, I mean, I don't know. The only thing I spend money on is like candles. I like nice candles. That's like really it. Everything else, I'm pretty content. But what was I going to say? The way that I put it, so I live in Ohio. I'm from Ohio, and where I live is a part of, we're nowhere near the lake. I'm not near Lake Erie, but there is a reservoir nearby. And one of the ways that a lot of people kind of measure each other's wealth when we're sizing each other up is whether or not you have a boat. And so whether or not you have a boat says a lot about where you are financially. People ask me all the time, oh, do you have a boat? And I say, yes, I have a canoe, and I bought it used.
Hey, you have a boat.
It's a boat. It floats.
Yes. Oh my, wow. That's funny. I live in South Point right now. So, which is like near Huntington, West Virginia, if you know around there. So
I know
fun. I like being in Ohio and with you.
Nice.
Well, so just to echo one of the Scribbler, thank you so much for this in-depth insight, because money is definitely a taboo, at least from what I've seen, a taboo kind of conversation topic within the publishing world. So having access to that kind of insight is just really, really interesting and great. And thank you for that, for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not precious about it. Like I just share pretty openly because I think it's important for people to know. Yeah, the way you get paid really chips away at that big number that you start out with, thinking, yep, gonna get a boat this year. No, you're not.
And to know that it's paid over 2 years too, because even, thinking, oh, well, maybe it's if I sell it for 75,000, that's basically a salary for the year of $75,000. When no, that's
Right.
That's not it. You have to think of taxes. You have to think of your agent or your editor, whoever it is, and where that money goes. So that's really great. All right. Let me ask you one more question. We have for best advice for crafting and refining the query letter.
Yeah, query letters are just the bane of our lives. So I was writing query letters for 10 years, and I got really good at it, which might sound dumb because it took me 10 years to get good at it, but I did. The only way I got good at it was that I shared it with people. I shared it with other writers, and I got feedback. And that is when I started to come through. I don't think that you can actually improve your query letter unless you are confirmed in your genre and age category that can help you to craft that query letter. You show it, you can't, my sister's an English teacher, and I showed her my first query letter, and she was like, yeah, this is really good. Well, yeah, it was, if you don't understand what a query letter is, right? Like it didn't do the job. It also was 2 pages long and had like literally one line that flowed over onto the next page, which is so incredibly stupid. But my sister just doesn't know that that's a no-no in the querying world. So you have to be among other writers, and you have to be willing to share your work. I know I myself, when I first was entering the arena of trying to find critique partners, I was always worried about someone stealing my idea. And then I got like, I don't know, older, and I got more experience, and I realized it's like, number one, it's like 99.99. It's just not going to happen. And the reason why is because writers don't get excited about other people's ideas. We're excited about our ideas. I would read so many like critique partner stuff, and I would be like, yeah, I mean, it's cool and I like it, but I'm not like, oh, damn it, I wish I would have thought of that. Like, never. So don't be afraid to share your stuff and share the query letter. I will say too, I have a blog and podcast called Writer Pants on Fire. And the podcast has like over 200 episodes at this point. It's been running for 4 or 5 years. And the blog has been running since 2011. And one of the things that I offer on the blog is a free query critique. So those happen on Saturdays. They're called the Saturday Slash. And if you want to look at the blog, which just Google Writer Pants on Fire, it is on my website, MindyMcGinnis.com. There's a tab for Writer. And just read the slashes. Read all the slashes. There's like, 12 years worth of slashes. And you can see the advice that I give other people. And then also, of course, if you would like to have me look at your query, of course, I can absolutely do that. If you want to sign up for the slash, which all you have to do is email me. So.
Alrighty. That is... I will absolutely be seeing you over there on your podcast and on Saturday Slashes, and I hope everybody else does too. If you don't know her website, I will throw it up at the end of this, and you can obviously Google her name as well. Alrighty. Stephen, I hope that was helpful to you. It was very helpful to me. And it is now a couple of minutes over what we usually do. So, Mindy, thank you so much for staying on a couple extra minutes. Thank you for all of the advice that you've given. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our scribblers with?
Not really. I mean, check out my books, obviously. That would be cool. And my website. And, also, I will say that I am a good example of someone that writes across genres. I've written across many, many genres. And so I think it's a good way to consider voice, because even though I've written across multiple genres, my voice is always the same. And I think it's an interesting little area of the market or not necessarily the market, but it's a little area of the publishing industry where I feel like I am a good example of voice remaining consistent even across genres.
And that's something I wish we had more time to talk about, because that is really interesting. So thank you for leaving us with that. Everyone, please, if you don't already have all of her books, go ahead and check her out. And we will see you next month for our next exclusive chat. But for today, again, Mindy, thank you so much. And everyone, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Alrighty. Bye, everyone.